Hi, my name's Keith Cooper of Northlight Images, and in this video I'm going to try and address some issues of what colour management isn't. Why what it isn't? Because a lot of people seem to ascribe almost magical properties to the correct use of colour management in their photographic workflow, whether that being actually taking photographs of things, scenes, whatever, right through to whether you show things on screen or whether you print things, whether you print them yourselves or whether you send things off to be printed. Now, there are lots of questions as I get asked about this, and quite often I'm thinking, well, it doesn't actually do that. So what I'm going to do is an overview of different aspects of colour management in a photographic and printing workflow. Now, I say photographic, it could be for printing artwork. It's very similar if you're editing images on screens and how you want to set things up. So what I'm going to look at are aspects of setting up screens, what it actually means, calibration profiling, printer profiling using profiles, what that means as well, what that does. But I'm also going to cover camera profiling, different aspects of it, and scanner profiling. Now the camera and scanner things is relatively simple to cover, so yeah, but I'll cover some of the bigger issues first, starting off with screens. Now, first of all, do you calibrate screens or do you profile screens? Well, actually, you do both, and it's because there is a difference between them. Profiling measures the characteristics of something, and the profile is created to allow whatever system you're using, whether it be printing or displaying something on a screen, to actually do things better. So in profiling, I might profile a screen and find its range of colours or its gamut. That's the profiling aspect of it. Calibration is something very different. Calibration is about setting things to known standards or known settings. They don't have to be standards. So for example, I have calibrated and profiled these screens. Now my laptop here needed, this is a newish MacBook Pro, didn't need much doing. I'm just using this as is at the moment. But this screen here, I've calibrated it to a very low color temperature of around about 4000 K. Now that's, I would never ever edit on a screen at this setting, but with the lighting I've got round here and the settings and the light over here, hopefully it means that the screen looks fairly good on the video. This screen should look grey, bluey grey. This should look wrong. And in fact, even visually, this looks wrong because everything else around here is set to 4000. I will mention room lighting and things like that again in a moment in connection with settings. But really, when you're setting up a screen, you profile it, and often the software does both of these things at the same time, hence possibly the confusion. You generate a profile which your system will use, but you calibrate to settings. So what sort of settings? Well, some people, there are standards for these if you're in graphic arts. And I should say I'm talking really here about photography, art printing. I'm not talking about commercial print. Color management can get very technical and very specific in commercial environments. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about how most people would actually make use of it. And as you see, I've got a fair assortment of color checker cards and devices here collected over the years of all my testing. I've been doing this stuff for at least 20 years, looking at it and writing articles and doing bits and pieces about it. Nothing much has changed in many respects. It still works. And the same things that it doesn't do now, it didn't do then. But anyway, settings for your screen. If you've got, let's say, gamut setting, and you've got a wide gamut monitor, such as this one here, the temptation may be to set it to something like Adobe 98 in the settings on the monitor. Because, well, you're working in Adobe 98, etc., for editing your files or something like that. And you set it to Adobe 98. Well, it is not actually, the screen is not actually being set to that. It's somewhere close to it. What is probably better is to set your screen to its native gamut and then let the profiling software analyze that, because profiling is analyzing what it does, and come up with a profile that you can just use. And then it's much easier to edit that way. You might, I've got another screen over there when I'm doing video editing, which is set to REC 709 purely for video editing, just makes it easier. In that instance, I am setting a specific setting on it in terms of brightness and in color. But in general, you want to set your gamut as good as it will give. Does mean that you can actually use sRGB monitors for editing. I edited photos for years using an sRGB monitor. There are a few considerations and it is generally nicer and easier to edit photos on a wider gamut monitor, but you needn't worry about it too much. And in fact, I've edited photos for years in the Pro Photo color space, which is huge and beyond what any monitor made can ever get close to. That's not a problem, you just need to know what you're doing. So I've got that set up. For brightness, now you can, when you do your calibration, typically using a device like this one's a Calibrate Display Plus HL, various other ones I've got here. In fact, this cardboard box here, I'm having a bit of a clear out at the moment, this cardboard box is packed full of old monitor calibrators. As I said, I've been testing these for 20 odd years, so there is a huge great collection of old monitor calibrators sitting in there that I really ought to find something to do with. I got so many of them, and old calibrator, you say, well, why don't you still use them? Older calibrators may not handle the display technology. So some of the calibrators in that box were designed for CRT monitors. They were not designed for LCD monitors with LED backlighting. They might have been designed for LCD monitors with a fluorescent tube lighting, but certainly not OLED type screens and other advanced screens like that. So people say, why do I have to update monitor calibrators? Why can't I use one from 20 years ago? Well, you might be able to, but there's always a chance that its internal settings and everything won't match the kind of screen that it's looking at. Colorimeters are what are used. They measure light and color, but they are tuned to a display. If you want something that will work still, you could take something like that. This is an i1 Studio. Oh no, this is a Color Checker Studio, get the right one. That's the same device essentially as the old Color Monkey. That is a spectrophotometer. You can use that with the appropriate software for profiling, calibrating any screen. There's no real problems there with something like that. That will just work for it still, even though it's quite old. I've got one of the original Color Monkeys from 2007 or something, 2008. It still works fine, certainly for generating profiles for papers and things like that. So in terms of setting brightness, well, it depends on how bright your room is and what you're doing. I typically set monitors, and I'm not, so this one, if I were using it for editing, I would set perhaps to 100. The setting is 100 CD candelas per square meter. That setting, if you get your screen too bright, remember that profiling just measures the gamut and the characteristics of the screen. But if you calibrate it and it's too bright, then you can end up with dark prints. And the most common problem I see people getting is their prints come out too dark, and it is because the screens are too bright. It's been a problem for years. It's an ongoing screen. Incidentally, if you get a system like this, anything for measuring and settings, doing monitor calibration, if you get anything like that and it has an auto settings or anything like that, ignore it. Any auto settings, they're just made for people who can't be bothered to actually try and work out what they should have. They will be, your screen will be too bright, too dim, whatever. Incidentally, if your prints come out too bright and you make your screen dimmer, your prints come out too dark, sorry, and you make your screen dimmer in an attempt to counter that, and then you find your screen is too dim for the room you're working in, well, take that as a big hint that the room you're working in is too bright. This is if you're in a print workflow. If you are just producing stuff for screen, characteristics are a bit different. But anyway, that's it. That's the key elements of calibration, profiling of screens. Use the default settings in the software. If the software has settings that you don't understand, either read the help files and find out what they mean, or take that as another big hint that you don't actually need those features. One reason you don't always need to buy the most expensive calibrators to get better results. Same devices, just different features in the software. That's quite common these days. Now, that's setting for screens. What about print? Printer profiles. You do not calibrate printers. There is a calibration. It's typically when you first set up a printer. Some bigger printers will have a thing which pulls them into a known standard. That's calibrating the printer. That's a one-off, usually covered in the setup and only in bigger, better printers. Certainly not smaller ones like the 8550 I've used for a lot of testing. You can calibrate this big P5000 here, for example, but that's a pro production type printer. Very different in its uses. So anyway, profiling printers. In profiling printers, you measure a target, printed target, that is measured, the software goes through, it generates a profile. Remember that to get the best results from a paper in a printer, the profile links together the printer, the paper, and the media settings that you're using. Now, you use a particular media settings when you're creating the profile. So you might have a particular media setting, doesn't need to be the same as the paper even, but it is, a profile is made for a particular printer, it is made for a particular paper, and it is made for a particular media setting. I've done another video elsewhere about the differences between media settings and profiles if you're confused on that one, but I've got lots more covering it. So there is your profiles. You create profiles, you print stuff, you measure it, and it creates it. Cheaper ways of doing it for yourself are something like that. That's Color Checker Studio, old i1 Studio, the Color Monkey, Spider Print does it as well. But you know, essentially you make the profiles. Now, profiles for papers are absolutely, and this is one of the bits what color management isn't. Profiles are not to make all papers, prints look the same. If you print on different papers, prints are going to look different. The profiles are about giving you the optimal printing on that printer with that media setting on that particular paper. The results may look better or worse than a different paper with its profile as well. Color management, to me, I sometimes hear the word color management and perfection with it. No, color management is not about that for me. Color management is about getting things right first time more often. And then when things go wrong and don't come out as I like, as I feel they should, it helps me find out why. So an understanding of color management helps you get things, it saves wasting paper is one thing. Now, in doing all of this, you do not need all this kit that I've got and things here. I just got this out because I was having a clear out and hadn't realised how many of these cards I've collected over the years of different types and sizes, even the little tiny colour checker card there. So papers differ. And in fact, one of the things, the joys of printing is sometimes thinking an image will match a particular paper. Now, I did a video a while ago looking at the Hahnemuhle metallic paper. That was one of the most difficult papers I've ever come across to find images that worked on it. But when they worked, they looked absolutely superb. But when the images didn't, it just looked pretty, not much. Now, that is a printed result which is completely different to another paper. Similarly, I might print on glossy papers. These are semi-gloss papers in the back. I can't remember exactly what these were printed on, but yeah, they all differ. And one of the reasons for experimenting with papers is to find a look that you like. There is no best. People contact me and say, Keith, what's the best paper for such and such a printer? I have no idea, because I don't know what you print. I don't know what your tastes are or anything. I can point to different types of papers and that, but there is no best on it. And colour management, and particularly if you see a review of papers and it ranks them in terms of gamut volume or some other nonsense like that, perfectly valid figures, but utterly meaningless in the context of choosing papers for most applications, because you really do not need to know things like that. You can have a huge gamut volume, but the printer you can get banding and all sorts of poor quality in sort of flat areas of time. A gamut is about a boundary condition. It's not about what goes on inside. And the colours of most images sit firmly within the gamut of most pictures. Now, when you're looking at this, what about when the gamut extends beyond it? Well, this is one of the areas where you might want to look occasionally, and I say quite deliberately occasionally, at soft proofing. Now, I have some examples of prints where I have looked at soft proofing to get an idea on a particular paper. So soft proofing is trying to simulate on a screen what a print will look like. Now, right up front, a screen can never match a print. And the whole idea is this print, which is that image there, this print is light being reflected off it and whatever. This has got light being emitted from it. Now, of course, you're seeing both through the medium of video recording and the likes of that, and there's all sorts of things go on in processing, and the fact that the video's on YouTube means it's been processed again. So, you know, in general, if you ever see something on YouTube where someone is trying to show comparisons between prints, say between two similar printers, and they go, look, here's two prints, be very, very careful about how you interpret that, because the vagaries of recording stuff of that are so far apart that, you know, essentially you cannot ever truly match a print and a screen view. And to try and show it on video, well, you're hiding nothing. Sure, you can show differences. You can make it so that differences appear, but are they real? Would someone actually here in the room see those differences? Quite possibly not. Maybe they see stronger differences. You can't tell. This particular print, this is one of my test images. Incidentally, this particular image is not directly available. It is because I've got a copy of i1 Profiler. This is the test image that is inside i1 Profiler. I've got copies, licensed copies of i1 Profiler, so I used this test image. This is one that you can download from the Northlight Images website. I've got this in all my printer reviews and things. This one, immediately I can see the greys on this look a little bit out. Other than that, it's not bad. And yeah, this was printed on an Epson ET 18100, probably using printer color management rather than a profile, because the although it looks fairly good, the greys and the grayscale black and white bit is not quite right. But yeah, that's a whole different area. But anyway, test images. Use test images for your printing as well. I've got loads of stuff on this. I'll put, if you're interested in more color management stuff, do have a look at my main index that I created of all the videos I've done over the last few years. It's the only real way to find out, because YouTube is hopeless for any form of curation or indexing of content. So if you're interested in more color management stuff, do have a look at the actual index on the Northlight Images website. It took me a good couple of days to put that together to try and cover all the subjects and things. But anyway, for print, I said screen doesn't match. Soft proofing can give you a good indication of potential problems. You need to consider things like rendering intents and stuff like that. Once again, if you're interested, there is more information. Incidentally, my copy of Color Management, Real World Color Management, is very well thumbed. I'll put a link in the notes. This is the book. If you want to know more about color management, get hold of a used copy, Fraser et al., Real World Color Management. Read that, and many other things that I've covered in this will fall into the blindingly obvious category to you. It's an excellent book. You don't need to read all the bits of it, so the bits on commercial print, if you're interested, but a few key chapters in that absolutely explain all you really need to know about aspects of color management. Color management, as I said, helps you understand why things go wrong. So it helps me, in the guise of perhaps soft proofing, realize why I can't, on a particular paper, print a particular color, particular influence, but typically strong colors. I did a print recently, a moonrise print, and I wanted to get the correct color in the sky, and I used the word correct there, correct to me, as from my perception, my recollection of the scene. I wanted to get the right colour in the gravel on the beach, the sea and the sky. And to get those, I actually did some soft proofing. And then when I thought I'd got it close, I did a few test prints on smaller bits of paper and another adjustment of it. It's a process that I don't go to very often, but if the colour of the image is really important, then I will sometimes use soft proofing. All I say is don't use it for every single image. What you really need to do is understand the differences between print and screen, and then you can just go through and do it, and you'll find you won't need soft proofing because colour management helps you get it right first time more often, and that is the key for it. Some images you will find there are tricky aspects of it, but once again, soft proofing has its limitations, and it's a screen and that's a print. And the key bit to remember is that if you're in a print workflow, if you are making prints and the print is the final result, it does not matter one jot what it looks like on screen if the print comes out right. In fact, because of the way that printing often reduces the intensity of some colours and makes the colour balance change and things, you may find that to adjust your image to get the best looking print, you no longer have the best looking image on the screen. So if you want a quick takeaway from this in terms of editing and printing, accept that this is just an intermediate stage on the way to a print. It's quite difficult sometimes to look at a print, an image. You've got it to look exactly how you want it on the screen, and then you just, oh, I want to print that. No, it doesn't work that way. It's about getting the print looking right, not the screen looking right. So by all means, work on getting the image on the screen to look as good as you like. Obviously, if your image is going to be used for for presentation or projection and things like that, then yes, sure, you're working on screen images. But if you are interested in print, it's the print that matters, not what's on the screen. So it is quite difficult. Say I've tried to explain this. I do sort of bespoke one-to-one teaching on sort of advanced printing technologies and how stuff to make good prints. And one of the bits I found people often have difficulty with is that little bit of thinking they're finished when they've got it looking great on the screen. No, you've got the perfect negative perhaps, but you haven't got the perfect print, to put it in film terms. So there you go, that's screen, that's print. I said I'd mention camera profiling, calibration even, scanner profiling. Scanners you can't really calibrate because there's nothing much to adjust in them. Cameras, well, maybe you can. But anyway, stunt cameras. Two basic approaches to setting colour management. Well, three actually, because one of them is accept what the camera manufacturer has done. That, and I'm a professional photographer, I'm a commercial, architectural, industrial photographer, almost always I use my cameras with no additional calibration or profiling. The only two times I tend to do it, and there are two sorts, there is creating ICC profiles, the same as printer profiles, but for input devices, so you can create an ICC profile for your camera. Now, when you process the images, you have to jump through a few more hoops, so you may need to use software. I know DxO Photolab incorporates it, C1 incorporates it, Hasselblad Focus into it. So you can incorporate ICC profiles, but the problem is they're ideally used for known lighting conditions. Trying to create an ICC profile for your camera for general purpose use, where the light may change, where you may shoot indoors, outdoors, whatever. All you really need there, most times, is a good white balance. And get yourself a good grey card like that. Now, you can use ones like these colour checker passports here. This is the video version, but there's the photography version that I keep in my camera bag. Now, you could use that for grey balance. That's got a grey card on it as well. But I do sometimes use a proper grey card, and I shall use it. I'll just move this one around a bit, and I shall probably use this when I white balance this video when I'm processing it afterwards. But anyway, that's a proper grey card. You neutralise it on that, and that sets, yeah, that takes care of most things. Now, you can indeed do a camera profile. You'll need to look into how you do it, but typically something like this. Now, this is a color checker card, a color checker SG. This one normally lives in a plastic bag. I've got it out specially. These are expensive things. You do not leave them laying around to collect dust and the like. So this will be going back into its bag in its case in a drawer as soon as I finished this. Now that, and there are some problems with this. You can see it has a reflection on it as well. So lighting these is quite tricky. So you can create profiles from those, but you can also ICC profiles, but you can also do what's called DNG profiles. Certainly if you use Lightroom or Photoshop, you can use, and I'm sure there are other software, I can't remember exactly what supports it, but you can use DNG profiles. Now, I've done stuff about studio lighting, about DNG profiles, dual illuminant, single illuminant profiles for handling lighting and product photography. That product photography in a studio where I've got known lighting, that is where I'm going to create profiles for my lighting. Possibly DNGs, maybe at a push, ICC profiles. Where would I look for making ICC profiles? Art Repro. Art Repro is probably the most technically complex area of photography I ever dabble in, and I say dabble quite deliberately because we do not do offer an art reproduction service. First of all, I don't have a studio to set up with the requisite lighting and set up for it, and also it is very tricky to get right. There is an aside from a business point of view that if you're a technically minded photographer like I am, you have to deal with artists who are likely to be rather imprecise in their definitions of colours. It can be utterly infuriating to get somebody to tell you what's wrong with a print. But that's just personally, that's me, that's why we don't do it as a business. Technically, I do it. I do it for a few people, but it's on people I know and stuff like that. But that's using profiles, DNG. So there we go, we've got that, that's camera. I mentioned scanner profiles. Scanners often come with profiles. Certainly when I tested the Epson ET8550 scanner, it was very good. I did make a profile for it, and if you look at the 8550 review, I make a profile, and I have the profiles available that were made using this target here for the 8550 scanner, and it is really good for reproducing a watercolor sketch that somebody had lent me to use. It worked very well. So for scanners, you typically make ICC profiles, but a better option for many scanners is to get good scanning software, something like ViewScan. Now, I put a link to the 8550 review, the main written review, that covers all the aspects of that. So if you're curious about scanning artwork and things with a scanner like on the 8550 or something, which is only meant as a sort of, you know, consumer level office printer scanner, it's surprisingly good if used with care. You can calibrate, get it right, you can profile your scanners. It's easily done. It's much like the thing between people saying prints measured in DPI and PPI, and they confuse them. They are two different things. I get them wrong sometimes as well. You can use one of these cards on a scanner and get better results. Depends on what you're scanning, depends on the software you use, all sorts of things as to whether they're any use or not. So there you have it. That covers most aspects of color management that I would normally consider using as a photographer and as a printer. Hopefully it's made a bit of sense. If you've got any questions, please do ask. I really do welcome questions from people because that helps me put together things like this. So thanks for watching. As I said, any questions, let me know, and bye.